So you might have noticed behind me, we have some tents and a fireplace, fire pit and some backpacking gear and all sorts of stuff. And you might have been asking yourself, I know he keeps talking about adventure. Is that what that's for? Like why is there a big tent on the stage? Well, because our smaller one has black mold spots on it. So that's why we had to use the big one. But this is when I think of adventure. Keep talking about adventure. I love adventure. And so I wanted to give a vision of adventure. When we think about adventure, a lot of us up here in the Northwest, here in Montana specifically, we think, outdoor adventure. We think hiking and backpacking and camping and fishing and climbing and hunting. So you might have noticed that I also have a bright orange, providential orange, look at there, orange wristband on, and it says Auto Belay. So I went climbing yesterday. And for first time in 15 years. Thank you, Tom, for making me make that pose again. I did it just for fun for that. I was like, sorority. But I was so nervous. I was like, I've not been climbing in 15 years since I worked at a summer camp in California. And I was like, am I gonna do okay? Last time I tried, I was like, Amerlyn rocked it. She went to rock climb. Ew. Didn't mean to do that. So she went rock climbing in Seattle and just rocked it. And I was like, oh, I'm so nervous right now. I was like, there's no way I can top that. Then we went yesterday and 80 pounds lighter. I made it to the top. First go. I was like, who is this guy? Who is this guy I'm looking at? I've not done that in years. And then I went up again and changed my technique a little bit. Listen to Val a little bit more with the, plant your feet and then go up and then find your footholds first and then reach up to see where you can grab and then lift yourself up. And it was a lot easier the second time. Of course, it was a short wall. And then I got certified on the Auto Belay. I could do it myself, the whole thing. And then I went on the big wall. It's like double, it's like what, twice as high or something like that. It was crazy. Literally felt the heat kick in. I was like, oh, here's the thermal level. And then got it to the top. I was like, what's going on right now? And then tried the harder one and made it a little less than half. But it was the first time I'd gone climbing in a long time. And I was so excited to do it, just to figure out how much I could push myself. But yesterday was a crazy, awesome adventure. I loved climbing. Now I'm like, okay, this 5 punch card thing ain't gonna be enough. I gotta have a membership. Because I'm now okay, I'm getting stronger even throughout the day. And then I finish it off by climbing all the way to the top again, even after I just failed at the harder one. Every time I see myself getting better and better. Every time I try something new outside of my comfort zone, physically, I get stronger at it, more able. One of the things about adventure, I love this about adventure. You never know. You never know. In the end, no matter what happens, you never know what's going to happen. This unknown, this uncertainty, this risk. There's a lot of risk. What if the belay line snapped? What if, Val was belaying me? You fall and hello, Val, But she didn't. She stood on the ground. I was like, wow, cool, physics. But you never know. But the coolest thing about adventure is that no matter what happens, good or bad, someone loses an eye, someone loses an arm, someone gets an elk, whatever the story is, there's always a story to tell at the end of adventure. Always. You just have to go out and do it. There's always a story to tell. This is why hunting stories are such a fun thing to talk about, right? We know those who have been hunting. Why do we tell hunting stories? Because we love reliving that adventure. We love reliving that adventure. And don't worry, Josh, we'll talk about that story a couple weeks coming up. Because there's a story to be told about that elk hunt with Josh. I'll tell you what, I'm excited to tell that story. But it's about reliving the adventure. Life and faith, as we've been talking about, are meant to be an adventure. It's not supposed to be this boring thing. Life and faith was meant to be an adventure. And whether hunting or hiking, backpacking, our camping set here, road trips or sports, weddings, family vacations, Yellowstone was right here. Whatever makes your life, fill in the blank, what makes your life an adventure? Because your life is an adventure to be lived. Whatever that looks like for you. What does it look like for you to live adventure? Because your life is a story that's waiting to be told. Your life is a story waiting to be told. A lot of people are just content just to stay at home, where it's safe, easy, predictable. You know what's going to happen on a daily, day in, day out basis, right? Yet this leaves our lives feeling disengaged. It feels like, even as I'm thinking about it this morning, there's like this wall that seems insurmountable, that is keeping me from relationships, that's keeping me from adventure, doing stuff, experiencing more. I see all this stuff on social media. I see all this stuff on television. I see the commercials of these guys climbing mountains. I see the commercials of that really awesome new 4-wheel drive SUV that's climbing mountains. I see all this adventure all around me, and yet it feels like my life just can't attain to what I would see as adventure. We see everyone else having awesome social times, awesome epic dinner parties, and having friendships that look like they mean something. And I'm like, I wish I had that. I wish I had that. I wish I had that life that I see on social media. I wish I had that life that I see on television. And I guarantee you, the people who are posting all the adventures that you're jealous of on social media are probably wishing the same thing. Oh, I wish that this adventure was that awesome. Because what you don't see is the 100 pictures that they took to get that one perfect display of what they want everyone else to think is the great adventure that they're having. Spend all their time trying to find that perfect picture that they missed the adventure. Or they're doing it by themselves. They have to go and set their camera on a rock because there's no one there to take the picture. Oftentimes, we might feel in our daily lives that it's boring and mundane and unfulfilling, unrewarding, just sitting at home watching TV. But not because of maybe the lack of doing things necessarily, but in the lack of sharing these experiences with others. I had great adventures for 10 years after I graduated college. Actually, after I graduated high school. I went on summer adventures. I taught climbing at a youth camp and all these things. And I had these great adventures, but now I don't even have a relationship with one single person that I shared those experiences with. And so it's like I'm telling the story, but I don't have someone that I've shared the story with. And so what does it look like to share our life's experiences with people that we live our daily lives with? Yes, maybe family, spouse, and kids. But what about friends? What about the friends that you have today? Do you have stories of life that you've shared with them? Oftentimes, life feels this way because we're unwilling to take that risk. We're unwilling to do the hard things. And often, I don't see many millennials. I see a few and some teenagers, but oftentimes now it's so hard to use our phone as a phone and call someone and say, hey, want to go have an adventure? What kind? I don't know, anything. Let's figure it out. Let's go to coffee and figure it out. To engage, here's the thing. It's so hard oftentimes to engage in our own lives. to engage and pursue lives and pursue flourishing in our own lives. Oftentimes the hardest thing for us to do is to pursue our own joy. For many different reasons. What is that reason that maybe in your life that you're like, man, for some reason there's this like self-sabotaging thing going on where I can't let life get too enjoyable because God doesn't like it if I'm too happy, right? Or I've never been treated well in my life, and so I don't deserve to be happy. Or I've done so many bad things in my life that I don't deserve to be happy, to have a flourishing life, a life that's filled with joy. And so I'm just stuck with this. Versus how can you, like we talked about the last couple weeks, how can you make a defining decision in your life to shift your trajectory and change your destiny? A defining decision coupled with new daily decisions to say, I am no longer satisfied with living a mundane, mediocre life. A lonely existence where it's just this and that. I'm not really even doing things that really excite my heart. Why is so when we think about relationships, sharing life with each other, sharing our experiences with one another, automatically when we think about relationships, friendships with other people, what keeps us oftentimes from pursuing our own joy in these relationships? Why do people not make the phone call? Fear. Well, fear of what? Let's look at that. Fear of what? Well, fear of rejection or abandonment. I cannot tell you how prominent this is in so many different ways. We talk about the fatherless generation for a reason. And not just the father. I mean, that's one example, but there's so many different examples of parents who maybe have abandoned us, friends who have abandoned us. Just all this fear of rejection. I'm not good enough. And so why should I pursue a relationship where I'm just going to end up feeling not good enough again? Well, another one, fear of being hurt, coupled with that, or hurting others. Maybe in your past, like you've hurt others severely, and you're still defining yourself by that. What would it look like to give that away to God? Give it to the Lord and say, I'm done hurting people. But that's not going to keep me from engaging to possibly love someone or be loved by someone. What about this? Fear of unmet expectations or perceptions. I'm afraid that this friendship, that this relationship is not going to be like the Instagram personality posts with their friends. And so I'm not going to pursue it because it's never going to be that good. It's never going to be exactly the way that I imagine it or dream or fantasize about it. So why should I pursue it? What are we looking for in our lives? What are we looking for? Ask yourself that question. In my life today, 30 years down the road, 60 years down the road, 85 years down the road, what is my life? What am I looking for? And I think most of us would say, I don't want to live a life that means something. A life that I could say is an adventure. Maybe not necessarily that it's super active or whatever, but just what does adventure look like for you? To where your life is not defined as this mundane existence of being a nice person and going off into just oblivion. A life that is meaningful. Because a meaningful life, let me frame this for you. A meaningful life, imagine your life. If you could wave a magic wand and make a meaningful life for yourself, I want to paint this picture for you. Is shared with others. Is shared with others. A meaningful life is shared with others. They are made up of meaningful relationships. in which to share your life. When we matter to others, because ask yourself this question: do I matter to others? Not am I productive for others? Do I produce for others? Do I matter to others because they just need me? I'm supplying a need for them. I'm caring for them. But do I matter? Could someone just simply sit with me? Do I matter to others? Because when we matter to others, when we give a crap about each other, like we've been talking about, that's what it means to love each other. It's actually care. We find our lives mean something because they mean something to someone outside of ourselves. And if I could promise you anything about meaningful relationships, it's this. One, they are messy. They take time. They take risk. They take patience. And for long haul. They take investment. You got to invest. Because if you're just sitting at home doing nothing, you're not investing in a relationship. But I promise you this, meaningful relationships are worth it because they bring life. They bring growth. They bring memories. The stories we're talking about, they bring memories and they bring joy, fulfillment to our lives. Many of us have this fear, and we wouldn't even call it fear because it's not like this, I'm afraid. It's just it's like this wall. I just can't feel like there's a wall that's right there that feels like flourishing and meaningful life is on the other side of this life, this wall. And we need a peace to calm that fear, because that wall is fear. Fear that keeps us from pursuing our own joy. We need inspiration to say yes to sharing our lives with others. Many of us need a fresh vision for our lives, to see life differently. How can we see life differently? We need a breath of fresh air into our lives, breathed into our lives. So let's talk about vision. Let's talk about the vision for your lives. So here, this is what we're trying to cultivate here at here at Shift. So let's look at our vision. This is why we exist here at Shift. It's this. Our vision at Shift is to execute an intentional, relationally driven strategy for causing personal, spiritual transformation so that together we can accomplish the work that God has given us to do. Let's look at that work. What is that work? To love God, love people, share Christ, and make disciples. That's the goal. That's the goal of what we want to do. That's the what. So now, this is what's going to set us apart from a lot of places. I mean, most organizations and corporations don't even have this, much less churches. Oftentimes they'll have a vision and a mission, but they don't have this. They don't have a plan. They don't have a how. This is the how. This is our how. This is our vision frame. This is what defines us. This is what shows us the adventure. This is the map. This is our mandate. This is our why, that mandate, that rally cry of shifting everyday relationships into authentic community to live God's adventure, not just camping. What does God's adventure look like? But to live that adventure fully alive. What does it look like for your life to be lived fully alive? What does it look like for you? Think about that. Write that question down. What does it look like for my life to be lived fully alive? What is God's call on my life for that? So one of the things we've been talking about recently is the map. So let's go to the map. So we talked about Big Circle last Sunday. So for these next 2 Sundays, we're going to be talking about this mid-circle, this middle circle here. Because as a reminder, the Big Circle is this Sunday morning gathering or large crowd events. And the ultimate goal is that orange circle, is that small circle relationship, that one-on-one, close, personal, meaningful one-on-one relationship. Because remember, our vision is what? A intentional relationally driven strategy for causing what? Personal, spiritual transformation. And we believe that that happens best in the small circle. In that one-on-one, close personal relationship. And this is a map for each one of you. You can see yourself in the map. Are you just coming on a Sunday morning? Okay, then what's the next step? Oh, the mid-circle. And what's the next step after that? The one-on-one. But generally it's too big of a leap to go from the big circle to the small circle. Because a lot of times, it's big worship service gathering, and like you might have a friendship or two that might come out of that. Like, what do you do? Like, meet the person next to you and be like, oh, we're going to be best friends now. Oftentimes, it's too big of a jump to go from the two. So the critical bridge between the big and small circle is that mid-circle. This is critical in the life of Shift Church. Jesus used his crowd ministry, like we talked about last Sunday. He uses crowd ministry to teach the crowds the deeper spiritual truths. But he did that also to teach his disciples specifically because they were part of that. But if you're only a part of the crowd ministry, if you're only part of the crowd during Jesus' ministry on this earth, you only heard half the story. Because what happened? Well, let's look at Mark chapter 7, verse 17. Now when Jesus, what? Left the crowd. He entered the house, a smaller place. His disciples asked him about the parable. This was an opportunity. The disciples had special access to Jesus in private quarters away from the crowd. But this wasn't just about the disciples being asked, being able to ask Jesus some questions. Like, it was all about Jesus and this group of disciples, this like one-on-one thing with all these disciples and Jesus. The mid-circle relationship that Jesus had with his disciples was one specifically designed to cultivate relationships among his disciples. Well, where do we see that? He gave his disciples his great commandment, which was to love one another. In fact, Jesus said it was this group's ability to love one another in this group setting because he cultivated an environment, this smaller circle, or this middle circle type environment, that they could learn how to love one another. They could learn about how to serve each other. Like he talked about in the upper room in John chapter 13. He said, I give you a new commandment, to love one another, just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. Everyone will know by this that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So when I say mid-circle here at Shift equals at groups. So our mid-circle equals at groups. So when I say mid-circle, when you see the mid-circle in the map, we're talking about our at groups. So these are the smaller groups here at Shift, but they're different than your typical small group. This ain't your grandfather's Oldsmobile. This is a new way of thinking, a new way. So one of the tactics that we have for these groups is that they're no more than 12 people. Figured Jesus kind of had that figured out. So why reinvent the wheel? Okay, we'll take that example from Jesus. 12 people. All right. Because that's where the special, getting the distractions away, because if you have too many people there, you can't be known, you can't be heard. People know if you're disappearing. So a small group is not like 20 people. A small group has to be small. And they also meet twice a month because your time matters. So let's look at that map again. So put that back up there. I want to give you a picture of the reasons for the vision of this map. Because when we first started putting this together, when I first saw this, I got super excited about the map. This is what really excited me. I was like, there's something to do. can you imagine? I mean, I don't want to go off too much on a rabbit trail, but man, that's one of the things whenever I've gone to visit a church, whenever I've gone to a certain place and like said, what else do they have? Like, what is the content? What is the substance of this church? And whenever I go and I just see, okay, they've got some small groups. I've been to small groups before. I've been there. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, donated the t-shirt because I couldn't marry it. But whenever I go to a church, I want to see, okay, Sunday morning is cool, but is this all you got? Sunday morning is fun. I love it. I like the teachings. I like the sermons. I like the music. But where's the substance? Where's the soul of this church? This, in my heart, this is the soul. This is the heart of the church, is relationships. And this shows us how to get into relationships. This shows us, this is the adventure in front of us. And so let's talk about the reasons. Why? Why should I get into that mid-circle? You're here on a Sunday morning, coming in Sunday morning, kind of checking it out. Why? I mean, why should you bother? Let's look at some of these. So number one, our mid-circle at groups are all rallied around shared passions and interests. Another tactic is that they are affinity-based, meaning that they're geared toward your passion, that which excites you, that which ignites you in your life and faith. It could be several things. It could be maybe coffee shops. You love getting around coffee shops. Well, we got a coffee shop group. Meets every other Saturday, which is meaning this Saturday. Put it on your calendar. This Saturday morning at 9:30, meeting over at Cafe M. Ladies, put it on your calendar. Show up at 9:30. Or maybe want a coffee group at a home. Maybe you like meeting at your house. Cup of coffee, hanging out, enjoying life. What about adventure? Maybe you like going out on adventures, going exploring, doing things together. Well, maybe you like the shared passion, climbing. What about a climbing group? You guys meet together. And then there's so many. I learned yesterday. Let me go and put the next one up there. I learned this yesterday. This was our group after climbing. We just spent, an hour or so just sitting on the mat. And just, it wasn't like this, youth pastor days where we do an activity. Okay, now let's debrief. Let's talk about this. We just talked about it. And out of this came this really cool revelation that we talked about on the wall, that when we talked about getting your feet set first when you're climbing, you have to set your foundation first before you can know where you're going. Worry about your foundation. What are you being founded on as a church? And that's one of the beautiful things that I love about what we're doing here at Shift, is that we've spent 6 months, before we ever launched the vision, we spent 6 months cultivating the foundation, setting our feet, and then launching up. I just had another one in my brain, but I'm not going to go there yet. Dynamic moves as a church. How do we, as a church, figure out dynamic moves? That's another story for another time. Maybe you're a book study. You love books. You love reading specific authors like C.S. Lewis, and you get together around with a group, with your dog, outside around a campfire, talking about the book you're reading. Maybe you're business owners, and you have a lot of associates that you want to coordinate with, and you're just loving getting together because you speak the same language. That's one of the cool things about affinity-based. When you get together with people of like mind and passion, oftentimes you speak the same language. If it's a Star Wars group, you speak nerd. Or like Lord of the Rings, you speak geek. You speak the same language. Business owners, you guys speak a weird language that I'm still learning, especially you marketing people, man. Maybe it's a walking group, an athletics group. Get together to go walking. Maybe a fun crochet, or crafts group. Crocheting. One of the beautiful things about crochet and knitting and all sorts of stuff is that it's so intergenerational, which again, reminder to our values, intergenerational, huge value. What groups, all these groups, as you see, can draw people from all different ages. It's not just, we don't have an old people's group. We don't have a young parents group. We don't have a teenagers group. We don't have a college group, because our lives should be intergenerational. The older teaching the younger giving energy to the older. Or, speaking, being able to, to speak millennial to new generations. Women's groups or men's groups. Seeing people coming together around the same struggles, because women, y'all speak your own language. Do you know that? And so, what could it look like? The sky is the limit. Imagine with me a little bit. Dream, not just a little, dream a lot. What would it look like to give you freedom? Tear down that wall of what church has always looked like, always been about. What small groups have always been about. What would it look like to actually not just feel pressured to show up, but to be blown out of your mind, excited to show up. You're just like, yes, I'm excited for that new square in crocheting. I don't know. I'm excited for that new challenge. I'm not excited for Tom yelling at me to keep going or holding me on the wall saying, get up there. That happened yesterday. But I was very thankful. Our ad groups are really a huge point of difference if they're done well. When we stop trying to put these small groups back into a box, the sky is the limit. What could they look like? What could you experience? But not only the fun, because here's the thing. They're not just a fun thing that we do. There's a purpose to them. They're lessons. They cause us to learn the deeper spiritual truths of life. Because these groups, people have groups out there. There's meetup groups if you want to go out there. You can just go out to the gym, hang out with people, meet new people if you're outgoing. But these are specifically designed to get people into deeper relationships. We even talked about this yesterday with the climbing groups. I saw a few groups of friends climbing, some clubs, right, maybe? But these clubs are not designed to get people to grow and flourish as people, to get to know each other in a deep and meaningful way. Oftentimes there's this, in these type of clubs, there's this relational barrier to this point and no further. Because number two, these are incubators for small group relationships. They're designed for this. Because like we said, we don't believe that everyone in the church can know and have a close personal relationship with everyone. But we do believe that every single person in the church can have a deep and meaningful relationship with someone. Because in the shift culture, this map is ultimately meant to lead each one of us into that small circle relationship. And we don't just hope that it'll happen. You'll hope to get to know someone, but we catalyze this. We do it on purpose. We do it with a purpose. When people are personally connected in AT groups, then the AT group becomes better and healthier. And then this group, this large circle group, gets healthier because you're healthy individually and stronger. Number three, deeper, more thorough study and conversations. So the big circle is the basis for our AT group discussion. So when we have discussion questions, so I write a few discussion questions for us to talk about in our AT groups, and giving some scripture suggestions. But I do this to make us, it's not just like this, answer the question and it's got an answer. Ask the question and it has an answer. I try to write these open-ended questions to cultivate discussion and contemplation. Because are there things in our lives that challenge us to think? How often are you challenged to think? Are you challenged, your critical thinking, how often is your brain actually challenged to think the deeper thoughts in life or your faith? I would say if you're just sitting around watching TV all day, you're not really being challenged. I want to provide a space where we want to, in the shift culture, this small group, this AT group, environment is one specifically designed where questions and doubts and wrestling are welcomed. And so we want to cultivate that here. Because I cannot tell you how important this is to each of our lives. I cannot tell you how many times this right here having a closed-minded environment of like, just believe the pastor, or don't challenge things, don't doubt. You're a bad person if you're doubting. Don't wrestle with, just believe. This has made people leave the church, where they asked a question and they were like, don't ask that. You can't ask questions. You can't challenge. You can't doubt. You can't wrestle. But we want to create a culture where wrestling is welcomed. Doubts are welcomed, because what do doubts do? They help invite conversation and discussion to grow, to find the answers together. So we don't have to have all the answers put together. Even as leaders and people in the church, I don't feel the pressure to have an answer for everything. I can say, oh, you know what? That's a great question. Hey, let's go meet for coffee and figure out an answer. Because it invites discussion. It invites conversation and dialogue. Because we all approach life and faith differently. And this is what makes it beautiful. If we're going through doubt and dissolution and conflict, curiosity, confusion, anything, we want to be able to talk about that in an environment that it is helpful. It's helpful for our lives in faith. A non-condemning way. And it also ends up being encouraging at the end of the day. Number 4, it is the hub from which most effective ministry stems. If you want to be in a ministry here at Shift Church, we want you to be in an ACT group. You got to be in an ACT group, or at least in the vision group, something, so that you can be in on the inside, on the culture, not the inside, be in on the culture of Shift Church and be perpetuating that culture. The same thinking, the values, the same mandate, the same measurables. Our ACT groups are the basis by which and through which we do all of our ministries. Like you may have noticed, like for the last few weeks and for the next few weeks until December, like through the end of December, we've actually hired a couple workers in our kids downstairs, because we believe that it matters for each and every one of you to be up here, for you guys to be hearing the vision, every single one of us. Because we know a lot of you love the kids ministry. We know that you love the ministries here, but we need you here first, then going and pouring out. When you're connected through an ACT group, when you're knowing and operating through what we do here. And this even includes outside ministries. Right now we're in a season of focusing all of our attention, all of our finances, all of our energies, and everything that we do as a church inside the 4 walls, inside Shift Church, inside here. And we're not focusing on or coordinating with other ministries. I actually had to have that conversation this week. I had to turn someone down. A good thing with a sister church locally, but it didn't fit into our vision. It didn't fit into what we're doing right now. And so I had to say, we're not going to promote it. Those are the hard conversations that we're starting to have. But here's the thing: we're fighting for flourishing. We're fighting for joy. We're fighting for this to take root. Because look at our frame again. This is who we are. This is what defines us. The mandate and the map and those values and remind you of those values. The values define everything that we do, and they also filter out everything that we don't do. There's a lot of good things that we could do in the world, but we don't do them. One that will specifically transform the way that we think about ministries, inside and outside the church, is that second one, relational intentionality. Because again, unless it's relationally intentional, or grows relationships small, or creates relational opportunities, then either we don't do it, or we rethink how we do it. It's going to have to shift our thinking. We don't just go to a music festival and give out water bottles. We don't just go and give out snow cones at a fair. We don't just go out and give candy away to kids, because it's not relationally intentional. It's not simple. It's expensive. It can get really expensive really quick. And number 5, developing relational intelligence. In order to learn how to relate to others, we kind of have to get together And in order to experience techniques, that's one of the coolest things that I've been hearing from Amber Lynn's group, is all the techniques that they're learning from this book, but all the opportunities that they're actually being given to put these practices into play. Like, for instance, about a month ago or so, she said, go off and be story collectors. Collect stories about each other. Find out what makes each other unique. Not just like facts, like favorite color, but like stories. Hear the story of someone else. Because what that does is it not only gets you to be relationally intentional with someone, but it also, two of the ladies discovered that they had a similar passion, which they're now going to use as a technique to learn this coming Saturday. It's going to be super exciting. But also now they've practiced. They've practiced hearing someone's story and asking the open-ended questions, learning techniques to communicate and to relate to others. And now they're able to put that same technique into practice with others in their ACT group or other people in their lives. Practical things, learning relational intelligence. Hebrews 10, chapter 10 says, "Let us hold unswervingly to the hope that we confess, for the one who made the promise is trustworthy. And let us take thought of how to spur one another on to love and good works, not abandoning our own meetings, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging each other, and even more so because we see the day coming." So these ACT groups are kind of this house-to-house concept in the New Testament. And here's one of our tactics for them. They stay together. They don't end. There's not like this 6 months to a year program where they come to an end and then we move on to a new group. Because we believe it takes time. Remember that first thing? It takes time? It takes time to grow and develop these between people, to earn the right to be heard, building that trust between each other. It's all about the relationships that we're building. Yes, it's about the fun things that we're doing, the activity that gets us together, but that's what just gets us together. It's really about the relationships that we're building in these ACT groups. It's all about the relationships, living out the one another in Scripture, learning a new way of being. So I'd encourage you, if you're not in an ACT group, get in an ACT group. Say yes to the adventure. Say yes to the adventure of authentic community, of relationships. Find out how you can live a new life. It's about learning a new way of being, which brings us to number 6, learning this new way of being. This is the quintessential important aspect of Shift culture here at Shift. Learning how to be through these relationships as our way of understanding and applying Scripture through the lens of relationships, through the lens of how can I be there for others? How can I get to know others? How can I be healthy? How can I grow in my life and faith? Because the best way to do that is through relationships. Our faith is not an individualistic, me and Jesus faith. It's a we and Jesus faith. Like Jesus prayed in John chapter 17, that they will be one, just as you, Father, are in me, and I am in you. I can't be one with myself. I gotta kind of have others around me to be one with. It's this relationship. Most small group Bible study ministries that I've been a part of have focused on growing in your knowledge. So we get around together in couches and we learn about the Bible. And we try to apply the Bible to our lives individually. I've never been a part of one that's cultivated an environment of community where the focus has been us together. But it's interesting to think about the New Testament. That more ink has been spilled over relationships and community and one another in the Bible than any other subject in the New Testament. And yet, it seems to be the most ignored in our churches. Look at it. Let's just take a gander. It's in your notes. Look at them. Love one another, live in harmony with one another, accept one another, forgive one another, admonish one another, encourage one another, build one another up, be kind, be devoted to, be at peace with, bear with one another's burdens, Show mercy. Regard one another as more important. Be of the same mind. It's right there. That's just the tip of the iceberg, y'all, from the New Testament. And yet it seems to be so ignored. This is what we're all about. This is what we're trying to cultivate, is environments that we can live these out, that we can put these into practice, that when we have this conflict in our relationships, or have this environment in our at groups, we can see directly how to apply the book that we claim to be the source of all life and hope and faith. This is the adventure. Relationships. The Sunday morning, it can't be it. Sunday morning cannot be the entirety of your experience here at Shift. We're trying to identify more leaders for new at groups. So for many who, the time and maybe the affinity of the group doesn't quite work for those here yet. And we're trying to learn how to be in our at groups culture. But here's the thing. We're learning how to do this together. So engage. Say yes to the adventure. Because like we've been saying, your life was never meant to be boring. Like it says in John 10:10, I came, this is Jesus, so that they may have life and have it abundantly, exceedingly greater than our expectations. We were meant for relationships. Our lives are supposed to find meaning and joy and flourishing and purpose through relationships. Real, authentic, growing, transforming relationships. Again, going back to this our vision. This is the map in the culture. Everything you see in our vision is about relationships. It's about how to make you healthy and us together healthy and flourish. Because here's the coolest thing about adventures. Adventures, whether it's backpacking, climbing, hunting, whatever, every time you go and say yes to the adventure, any adventure, these adventures change you. They grow you. They shape you. And like we talked about at the beginning, they create stories. Again, what is the story of your life? What is the story that you want to tell of your life? Relationships that will change you and will change others around us. Imagine what this could look like for you. Imagine. Dream. If you could wave a magic wand and be living a life of adventure, what would life look like for you? At Shift Church, our tagline, what we're trying to, we're re-envisioning church. So our tagline is Church Different, which is the title of this sermon series. Giving ourselves permission to think outside the box of how church has always been done. But think outside the box of your life right now. Dream. Imagine your life different. What would be the stories that could be told? Say yes to that adventure. Say yes to that adventure. God, we pray this morning that you would excite us with your Spirit for the possibilities. And as we pray to the God who is able to do exceedingly greater than anything that we could ever dare to ask or imagine, Lord, we pray that each one of us in this room this morning would dare to ask, what could life look like differently in the future? The eternal God that we're praying to, Lord Jesus, you are infinitely greater than anything we could ever ask or imagine, and you are so exceedingly creative, God, that there may be something that in our hearts that can stir this morning that we don't even know yet. this passion that ignites us that we don't even know yet. So, Lord, I pray that you would bring it forward, that you would show us, Lord, what adventure looks like for us. That you would show each and every one of us in this room what adventure looks like. And that you would lead all of us in this room, Lord, to engage in an ACT group, to say yes to the adventure. And that you would bring life and flourishing to each person in this room individually and us together, so that we can be authentic and that we can have joy and flourishing here at Shift and in each one of our lives here in Belgrade. God, we thank you for what you're doing in our lives and pray that you would do it more and more, that we would have your favor, Lord Jesus. Help us to dream. Help us to imagine life different. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.